The wind moved slow and steady through the pine, whispering like ghosts of things best left buried. Elias Whitlow, known as Elk to the few who ever got close enough to need a name, knelt beside a frozen animal track half covered in snowmelt. He was checking his traps along the Snake River, same as he'd done every few days for near a decade now. The air smelled of pine sap, damp soil, and the sharp edge of spring coming too early. A hawk circled above, silent. That was the first thing that told Elias something was off. The second was the crying. It wasn't the distant wail of a wounded animal. No, this sound was human, a child by the pitch of it. Elias rose slowly, eyes narrowing toward the riverbank below. Crying didn't belong out here. Not this far from the town, not in the wild. He moved downhill with care, his rifle cradled loosely in one arm. Each footstep over the wet leaves and pine needles was silent, honed by years of solitude. As the trees opened near the water, he saw her. A girl, small, no more than 9 years old. She sat on a rock near the river's bend, clutching her knees, shoulders shaking. Her hair hung long and tangled, wet with river mist. Mud smeared her dress, no shoes. Elias stopped 20 paces out. "You lost?" he asked, voice low like the wind itself. The girl didn't look up. Her sobs quieted for half a breath, then returned. He took a step closer. "Ain't safe down by this water alone." Still nothing. Another step. Then another. She looked up. Big, wide eyes, blue as glacier ice and red-rimmed from crying. Her lip trembled. She tried to say something, but only a soft gasp came out. Elias crouched nearby, careful not to crowd her. "Name's Elias," he said, voice calm but firm. "Folks call me Elk. I live up that ridge yonder, you hurt?" The girl blinked, shook her head slowly, then nodded, then didn't move at all. Elias frowned. There was something in her look that chilled him deeper than the cold ever could. He'd seen eyes like that in the war, men who'd been broken too fast, too young. "Can't stay out here," he said. "Come on, we'll get you dry." She didn't move. He offered a hand. She stared at it like it might bite. He let it drop. "All right." "I'll carry you." When he reached for her gently, she flinched, just a flicker, but didn't fight. She weighed almost nothing. As he lifted her, the fabric of her dress clung to his coat, damp and stiff. He felt the ribs beneath. He didn't ask questions. Not yet. The hike back to the cabin was quiet. The girl clung to him only when the wind picked up. No words. Just silence and the creak of old trees above. The cabin sat nestled in a ring of fir trees, smoke already curling from the chimney. He nudged the door open with his shoulder and brought her inside. Warmth hit like a wave. The scent of wood smoke, dried herbs and old leather filled the air. He set her down near the hearth and wrapped her in a quilt. She looked around like she didn't believe any of it was real. "You're safe here," Elias muttered. "Ain't nobody gonna hurt you now." The girl didn't reply, just stared into the fire, silent, unmoving. And if you're hooked already, don't forget to subscribe for more gripping frontier tales. This story's just begun and there's a storm brewing beyond the pines. The fire cracked and hissed as sap bled from the pine logs. Elias sat across from the girl, sharpening a knife against a whetstone in slow, deliberate motions. The rhythm was calming, something he trusted when words failed. Outside, the wind pressed against the shutters, and a fresh dusting of snow began to fall. The girl hadn't moved much. She was wrapped tight in the quilt, feet curled under her on the bearskin rug. She hadn't spoken, not a single word. Only watched the flames flicker like they held answers she couldn't find anywhere else. Elias kept his voice steady. "You hungry?" No response. He set the knife down and walked to the stove, opened the cast-iron pot and stirred. The smell of rabbit stew filled the cabin, rich, earthy, warm. He ladled a portion into a tin bowl and set it on the low table between them. "Eat while it's hot," he said. The girl looked at it, then at him, then back to the fire. Elias didn't press. He sat back in the rocking chair, arms crossed, let the quiet stretch. She'd come around when she was ready, Or maybe she wouldn't. He'd seen trauma lock people up like a rusted gate, and sometimes it never opened again. But later, when he rose to refill the woodpile, he heard the soft scrape of the spoon. She was eating. That was something. By nightfall, the sky had gone black and heavy. Snow fell harder now, coating the world in silence. Elias brought in more firewood and double-checked the window latches. The cabin was small, one room with a loft above, but sturdy. It had withstood storms bigger than this. He glanced at the girl. She sat near the fire again, but this time her eyes followed him. Wary, but less empty. There was something flickering back to life. "Got a name?" he asked, hanging his coat near the door. She said nothing. "That's all right," he said. "You don't gotta talk. Just need you to feel safe." Her eyes flicked to his hunting rifle hanging on the wall, then quickly away. Elias saw the fear ripple through her shoulders. He crouched beside the hearth. "That's for bears, or wolves. Ain't ever pointed it at a person unless I had no other choice." Still nothing, but she didn't back away. As the hour grew late, Elias spread out a bedroll near the fire for her, thick with wool and down. She didn't protest when he guided her to it, didn't speak when he tucked another quilt over her shoulders, but she didn't sleep either. Elias climbed into the loft above and lay in the dark, listening. The wind, the crackle of fires, and her soft breathing. Shallow, uneven. Then came a sound he hadn't expected. A sudden gasp, not loud but sharp. Then a choked whimper. Elias rolled to his elbows and looked down over the edge of the loft. The girl was trembling, fists clenched in the blanket, eyes wide open, staring at something only she could see. He climbed down slow. When he sat beside her, she didn't move. Her breathing was ragged now. "You're safe," he said again. "Whatever happened, it ain't here anymore." The girl blinked rapidly. Tears slid down her cheeks. She buried her face in the blanket, hiding her sobs. Elias sat there until the crying eased. No questions, no promises, just the quiet company of someone who understood pain doesn't leave easy. Later, as the fire dimmed to coals, Elias glanced at the rifle on the wall again. He couldn't shake the feeling that this girl hadn't just stumbled into the wild. Someone had let her loose out here, or worse, someone was still looking. And the mountains didn't keep secrets for long. The morning broke cold and grey. Clouds hung low over the treetops, and a thin crust of snow crunched under Elias's boots as he stepped outside. The girl was still asleep when he'd left, curled tight beneath the quilt like a fawn hiding from wolves. Elias moved with quiet purpose, eyes scanning the earth for signs. He didn't like the feeling that had settled in his bones overnight. It wasn't just the girl's silence or the way she stared through him. It was something older, deeper. A scent on the wind he hadn't caught in years. He started along the edge of the ridge, following the trail down toward the river where he'd found her. The snow had melted some, but not enough to erase everything. That's when he saw them, tracks, not his, boot prints, deep, staggered, heavy. At least 2 sets, judging by the size and stride. One set moved upriver and disappeared near the rocks. The other had circled, stalked, watching. He knelt beside the prints and touched the edge with 2 fingers. The snow was packed down and partially iced. These weren't days old, they were made last night. After he brought the girl home, someone had followed them, close. Elias's jaw tightened. He moved along the trail faster now, rifle slung over his back but hand near the grip. 20 minutes upriver, the forest opened to a small clearing, the trees burned and blackened in places. A makeshift campsite, cold and half buried under the snow. He crouched near the remains of a fire, charcoal not fresh but still visible, scattered debris, a length of rope, cut at both ends. A stained kerchief half buried under wet ash. Then something else. Near the rocks, a glint of silver. He reached down and pulled it free. A broken locket, one hinge snapped clean, the other rusted through. Inside, the image had long faded, but the initials etched on the back were clear. CL. His fingers closed tight around it. Back at the cabin, the girl had said nothing about her name, but the letters twisted a knot in his gut. Elias had seen this kind of thing before. Men who took what they wanted, left nothing but questions and bodies behind. The locket went into his coat pocket. He stood and scanned the tree line. A raven lifted from a branch with a sharp cry. The forest was watching again. As he turned to leave, his boot struck something hidden beneath a pile of pine needles. He knelt, brushed it clear. A coil of rawhide rope snapped. At the end, a small piece of cloth torn from something finer than a working dress. The girl hadn't run away. She'd escaped. Elias looked back toward the cabin, though it was hidden behind a ridge. The wind shifted again, this time colder. Back at home, she stirred when he returned, but said nothing. Her eyes flicked to the door, then to his coat. He pulled the locket from his pocket and held it out without a word. She stared at it for a long time. Then her lips pressed into a tight line, and she turned away. He didn't push. That night, after she fell asleep, Elias sat at the table sharpening his knife again. The whetstone rasped slow and steady, but his mind ran faster than the river. Someone had tied that girl up, someone had chased her through the wild, and someone had come looking last night. He'd seen evil before, in uniform, in back rooms, in the way good men looked away when bad ones took control. But this was different. This was coming to his door, and if it came again, he'd be ready. The sky was a dull pewter grey, stretched thin over the mountains like an old canvas pulled too tight. Elias chopped wood behind the cabin, each swing methodical, precise. The blade bit deep into the rounds of fir, splitting them clean down the middle. The rhythm kept his hands busy, his mind, though, that wandered. He hadn't slept much, not because of the cold and not because of the girl. She'd slept deeper now, curled tighter, like some small part of her trusted him. That unsettled him more than if she'd screamed. Trust was a dangerous thing out here. As he stacked the split logs, the past started pulling at the corners of his mind. Not like memories usually came, this was sharper, like glass under skin. It always started with the sound of boots on frozen dirt. Georgia. The tail end of a losing campaign. Elias, younger and clean-shaven, carried a Sharps rifle and orders he didn't believe in. His company had marched into a farmstead under the command of Captain Judson Carver, a man who carried charm like a knife and used it just as often. That day the air stank of smoke and rot. A farmhouse burned behind them, smoke rising into the morning sky as if it was signaling heaven. Carver had ordered the flames, claimed the family inside was feeding Confederate raiders, but the girl in the yard, maybe 12, she hadn't been armed. She'd just run. Carver had raised his pistol anyway. Elias had never forgotten the way her screams stopped when the shot rang out. Or how Carver had smiled afterward, like he'd just swatted a fly. Back then, Elias had still believed in things, justice, duty, right and wrong, but that moment had cracked something deep. Later, when the war ended, Carver disappeared into the territories, building himself into something new while Elias buried the soldier and walked into the mountains alone. But ghosts didn't stay buried. And now a girl was in his cabin, frightened, silent, with a locket bearing the initials CL, the same look in her eyes as that girl in Georgia. Not just fear, a kind of knowing, a look carved into the soul when someone takes everything and expects you to keep breathing. Elias wiped the sweat from his brow and leaned on the axe handle. The snow had stopped, but clouds still rolled above, heavy with more. He heard the cabin door creak open, turned to see her standing there, quilt wrapped around her shoulders, feet bare against the cold. She didn't speak, just looked at him, then at the woods beyond. "Too cold out here for bare feet," he said. She stepped down anyway. Elias tossed her his coat. She caught it and didn't let go. "Sometimes the past don't stay where we left it," he muttered, not sure if he was speaking to her or himself. "You run far enough, it just starts running with you." She looked up. There was something in her expression now, not understanding but recognition, like she felt it too. He picked up the axe and drove it into the stump. "Come on. Let's get back inside." As they walked together toward the cabin, the wind shifted again, carrying a scent he hadn't caught in years, burned cedar and tobacco, the same blend Captain Judson Carver used to smoke, and Elias knew then, without a doubt, the war wasn't done with him. Not yet. Elias stood just beyond the tree line, scanning the horizon through a curtain of cold wind. The snow had settled into thin patches, melting in places where the sun fought through. He'd been up before dawn, unable to shake the feeling that eyes were on him. Something wasn't right. The forest was too still. He reached the ridge that overlooked the southern slope of his land, a natural vantage point he'd used for years to watch for elk. Today, it showed him something else. Smoke. Thin, faint, curling up from behind the far hills. Not chimney smoke. This was the kind made by riders. Camps built fast, burned fast. The kind that didn't want to be found until it was too late. He knelt behind a boulder, squinting hard. Then he saw it. A figure on horseback. Distant, but moving along the edge of the ridge, just below the tree line. Lone rider. Scout. They were closing in. Elias turned and headed back fast. The trees blurred around him as he took the trail with long strides, boots quiet against the packed earth. The cabin was still, chimney puffing steady. The girl was inside, and now, so was danger. Inside, he checked the rifle first, loading fresh rounds, then moved to the trapdoor in the floorboards. He kept a few supplies stashed in the crawl space, jerky, ammo, salt, extra furs. But he also kept traps. He pulled them up, one by one. Steel jaws, old but sharp. He set 3 along the cabin's backside trail, concealed under leaves and dusted snow. Back indoors, the girl sat at the table, watching him. "You see anybody?" he asked. She shook her head. He hesitated. "There's riders close." "Might be watching." Her hands tightened around the edge of her chair. She didn't speak, but he could see it in her face. The storm he'd been feeling had already reached her days ago. Elias walked to the corner shelf and pulled down a wooden box. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was a small Colt revolver. Clean, simple, reliable. He laid it on the table between them. "Ever seen one up close?" She nodded, eyes fixed on it. "Know how to use it?" This time she didn't move. He sighed and slid it closer. "You won't need it unless I tell you. But if things go wrong, you keep this pointed at the door, and you don't wait." Still, she said nothing. But her hand reached for the grip, small fingers curling over the worn walnut handle. She didn't flinch. That meant more than any words. Outside, the wind picked up, and with it the faintest echo of hooves on frostbitten ground. Elias stepped to the window and leaned close to the glass. There, near the north ridge, 3 more riders, distant but watching. They didn't approach, not yet, just circling. He pulled back from the window, heart steady, breath even. "They're feeling us out," he muttered. "Wolves don't bite right away. They like to circle first." He looked at the girl again. She hadn't let go of the revolver. Elias began locking down the cabin, reinforcing the shutters, setting a tripwire across the front path. Years of solitude had taught him how to disappear, but when that wasn't an option, he'd learned how to make hell come first. When the last board was nailed in place, he sat at the table across from her. The sun dipped low beyond the trees, casting the room in amber light. She reached into the pocket of her dress and pulled out a piece of charcoal. Quietly, she leaned over and drew on the table's surface. Rough lines, deliberate strokes. It took shape slowly. A brand burned into wood, a circle with a jagged C inside. Elias froze. He'd seen that brand before, years ago, on crates of stolen supplies, on wagons abandoned by raiders, and once on a letter signed by Judson Carver. The trail to town was half-frozen mud, lined with frost-stiff sagebrush and the skeletons of last summer's grass. Elias rode alone, wrapped in his long coat, hat pulled low. His rifle was strapped to the saddle, but his eyes did most of the watching. He'd left the girl in the cabin with food, the revolver, and instructions to bolt the door behind him. She hadn't spoken a word, but when he stepped out, her hand hovered near the gun. She understood more than she said. Pine Hollow wasn't much more than a cluster of buildings along a wagon trail. One saloon, a feed store, a smithy, and a church that doubled as a schoolhouse. Elias didn't visit often. Folks there remembered too much. He tied his horse outside the general store and walked straight past it, ignoring the stares. They always stared. The war had left more than scars on his hands. It had marked his name. He found her where he knew she'd be, in the back lot behind the Flynn ranch house, tending to a broken fence rail with a hammer and a scowl. Ruthie Flynn didn't wear her age the way most women did. There was grit in her bones and fire in her jawline. She looked up before he even spoke. If hell froze over, I figured you'd still be stubborn enough to walk through it. Elias took off his hat. Didn't come for small talk. Ruthie wiped her hands on her skirt. Figured, come on in. Inside, the house smelled like dry tobacco, fresh cornbread, and cedar. She poured him coffee without asking, then sat across from him at the worn oak table. "There's riders near my land," he said. She didn't flinch, just nodded once. "You think it's him?" "I saw the brand." Now her eyes sharpened. "Carver." He nodded. "He's close, real close." Ruthie stood and paced the room, arms folded. "Word is he's got men, lots of 'em, picked up drifters, outlaws, even a few deserters, pays 'em in gold and fear." Elias sipped his coffee. "What's he doing back here?" "Looking to finish what he started, maybe, I don't know, but he's been asking about certain folks, quietly." "Sawdust Joe told me he heard Carver mention your name in Laramie 2 weeks back." That made Elias sit a little straighter. "He's hunting." Ruthie looked at him hard. "What are you mixed up in now, Elias?" He hesitated. "Found a girl by the river. She ain't talking, but she's scared, and someone was tracking her. Judging by the locket she had and the brand she drew, she's running from Carver." Ruthie's expression darkened. "You think she's his?" "Don't know, but he wants her bad enough to send riders this far north." She turned to the window, jaw clenched. "He won't stop." "I know." She faced him again. "You can't take this on alone." "I ain't asking for help." "Too bad," she snapped. "Because you're going to need it. That man's not just dangerous, he's poison. And if he's coming back here, we all got something to lose." Elias stood, pushing the empty cup aside. "I had to warn you. If you see strangers near your land, don't wait. Lock up. Be ready." Ruthie reached out and touched his arm. Not soft, not tender, but strong. "You stayed out there for a reason, Elias. But maybe it's time you stopped hiding and started fighting back." He didn't answer, but the look in his eyes said everything. As he stepped back out into the wind, Ruthie called after him. "If Carver's riding, he won't come like a storm. He'll come like smoke. Quiet and already inside before you notice." Elias mounted his horse, pulled his coat tighter, then rode back toward the mountains. Toward the girl. Toward the fire. The night settled heavy over the cabin like a thick wool blanket. The fire had burned down to soft amber coals, casting long shadows across the floor. Elias sat in his chair, boots off, rifle within arm's reach. The silence wasn't new, it had become part of life out here, but tonight it felt loaded, the kind that held its breath before something changed. The girl lay under the quilt by the hearth, eyes open, staring at the flickering light. She hadn't spoken in days, not even when he left or returned, but she watched everything, always alert. Elias leaned forward and poured a bit of hot water into a tin cup, steeping dried mint leaves. He glanced toward her. "You eat enough?" he asked. She didn't respond. He sighed, leaned back again. "I know what fear does. It steals your voice, makes you small inside your own body, but you're safe here, all right?" The wind knocked softly against the shutters. Then, from the shadows, a whisper, fragile, hoarse. "Papa." Elias froze. He turned slowly toward her. She hadn't moved, but her lips trembled. Her fingers clutched the edge of the blanket tight. "What did you say?" he asked gently. Her voice cracked again, barely audible. "Papa." He knelt beside her, heart suddenly thudding. "I ain't him," he said, voice low. "But you can tell me about him, if you want." She shook her head, then stared into the fire. Her eyes filled, and tears began to spill, silent and fast. Her words came broken, halting, like she was pushing them through thorns. "He's not my papa," she said. "Hay said he was, but Mama said no." Elias felt a tightness in his chest he hadn't known in years. "Your Mama, where is she now?" The girl blinked slow, and her lip quivered. "He took us. Said Mama had to say yes, to marry." She cried. She said no. A pause. Then she stopped crying. Elias closed his eyes for a moment. And you ran? She nodded. He got mad, real mad. I ran when he wasn't looking. I hid. I thought I'd die. He took her small hand in his, warm and calloused from years of labor. You didn't die. You made it out. She looked up at him, finally meeting his gaze. I didn't know where to go, she whispered. But I kept walking, and then you found me. You did good, Elias said. You did real good. She looked down at her hand in his. I thought maybe you were a bad man too. I've been many things, he replied, but I ain't him. She nodded, as if that much she already knew. Elias stood slowly, his joints aching from the cold and the weight of memory. He walked to the mantel and took down a tin of salve, then returned and handed it to her. For the bruises, he said. She took it with both hands. The firelight caught her face just right, and for the first time she didn't look like a ghost. What's your name? Elias asked, voice softer than he'd meant it. She hesitated, then said, Clara. It fit. It sounded like hope. You can stay as long as you need, Clara, he said. Ain't nobody gonna take you, not while I'm breathing. Outside the wind shifted. The trees groaned like old men. Something had changed inside the cabin, but something else had changed outside too, a calm before another storm. Clara pulled the quilt up to her chin. If he finds us. Elias walked to the rifle and checked the chamber. He won't, he said. And if he does, he'll wish he hadn't. The night came down thick and silent. No wind, no owls. Even the trees seemed to hold their breath. Elias stood near the window, watching shadows shift along the tree line. His hand rested on the rifle like it was part of his body. Clara sat on the floor, back against the stone hearth, arms wrapped around her knees. She hadn't said a word since the fire burned down to coals. The silence was no longer from fear, it was waiting, like they both knew something was about to snap. Then it happened. The distant whinny of a horse, then another. Elias turned his ear toward the sound. Not one rider. Not three. Many. He moved to the door and eased it open just a crack. Moonlight filtered through low clouds, painting the snow in pale silver. Across the clearing, maybe 50 yards out, he saw them, shapes on horseback, shadows in the trees. Still, watching. Clara stood and stepped toward him. They're here, she whispered. Elias nodded. Don't go near the windows, stay low. She crawled back behind the table, small hands gripping the revolver he'd taught her to hold. He stepped outside, slowly, rifle in hand. A voice called out from the darkness. Deep, drawling, confident. Evening, Elias. He knew that voice. It hadn't changed. Judson Carver. Elias didn't answer. I got something that belongs to me, Carver called. Elias kept his rifle steady, eyes locked on the dark. Don't reckon that's true. Little girl. Goes by Clara. She's mine. Elias scoffed. She's not a damn horse, Carver. A few of the riders shifted, the creak of leather and saddle filling the night. She ran, Carver said. I'm just bringing her home. She ran because you killed her mother. Silence, then Carver's voice, colder now. That girl's got no one else. Best you hand her over before things get ugly. Elias took one step forward. You want her? Come take her. A long pause. Then the shuffle of movement. Riders spread out along the ridge, forming a loose crescent around the cabin. Elias backed toward the door, heart pounding but eyes sharp. Inside he bolted the door and dropped the iron bar across it. Then he lit the oil lantern and turned down the flame until the room was barely lit. Clara sat still as stone. Are they coming? She asked. They're waiting, Elias said. Trying to scare us, make us give up. Her voice trembled. Will we? He shook his head. Not tonight. He moved fast, checking the tripwire by the front trail, placing iron spikes beneath the windowsills. Years of hunting, years of war. It all came back now with terrifying clarity. He knew men like Carver didn't charge head-on. They circled, waited, tried to break your will first. But Elias wasn't the same man Carver had left in Georgia. He'd been reforged in silence, solitude, and snow. He loaded 2 more rifles and placed one near Clara. She looked at it, but didn't touch it. "They'll come when they think we're tired," Elias said. "But I don't tire easy." She whispered, "Neither do I." Outside, a single torch lit on the ridge, then another, then 10 more. 50 riders, waiting in the dark. Clara looked at him, eyes steady. "If they come," he met her gaze, "they'll have to come through me first." The first shot cracked just before dawn. Elias had been waiting, back pressed against the wall near the front window, eyes on the tree line. The sound was sharp, distant, but it wasn't aimed at him. It was a signal, a warning between men who meant business. Then came the thunder, hooves fast and many, branches snapping. The low roar of riders charging through snow and underbrush. The cabin trembled under the weight of what approached. Elias didn't flinch. He crouched low, steadied his rifle, and waited. The first rider broke through the trees, silhouetted against the rising light. Behind him came 2 more. Elias exhaled, slow and measured, then fired. The lead man tumbled from his saddle. The second rider jerked back, his horse veering wildly into a tree. The third kept coming. Elias ducked and rolled to the side as a bullet punched through the shutter, splintering wood. He heard Clara gasp, but she stayed down, just like he told her. He popped up, fired again, missed. But the shot scattered the riders. They veered, pulling back, not expecting resistance this early, not this precise. Elias didn't chase. He waited. Minutes passed. The woods went still again, but it was the wrong kind of quiet. Then the smell hit him. Faint at first, then stronger. Smoke. He turned to the window on the east side and saw it. A flicker of orange behind the barn, flames licking the dry boards, black smoke curling fast into the pale sky. "They set the barn," he muttered. Clara crawled closer. "The horses?" "Gone," he said. "Took 'em last night or chased 'em off." He handed her the smaller rifle. "You stay here. Only shoot if they break the door." She nodded, lips tight, eyes full of fear she refused to show. Elias kicked open the back door, rifle raised, and bolted for the barn. Heat pulsed from the flames, licking at the sky. The fire was growing fast, dry winter air feeding it like tinder. He crouched beside the water barrel, empty. No time to save the building. But the stash, his spare rifles, powder, food stores, was inside. Too risky. He moved toward the side, low and fast, but a shot rang out. Bark exploded near his head. He dove behind the stone wall that bordered the chicken yard. Voices now, closer. "He's outside!" one shouted. "Back of the house!" Elias crawled along the wall, smoke choking the air. Then he ducked into the lean-to attached to the smokehouse. Another rider stepped out from the trees, didn't see him. Elias fired. The man dropped. Another behind him turned and ran. That was enough for now. Elias sprinted back toward the cabin, boots slipping on ash and snow. More shots cracked behind him. One whistled past his shoulder. He dove through the back door and slammed it shut behind him. Clara ran to him. "You're bleeding!" He looked down. A graze along his left arm. Not deep. He tied a strip of cloth around it. "They're probing," he said, "trying to see how many of us there are, trying to scare us." Clara's voice was barely above a whisper. "It's working." Elias crouched and looked her in the eye. "You're stronger than you think. Just hold fast." Outside, the barn collapsed in on itself with a thunderous crack, flames roaring. The ground shook under it. Clara turned to the noise, then looked at Elias again. This time she didn't ask if they'd be okay. This time she believed they would. Smoke still lingered in the air by midday, a dull haze crawling over the trees like regret. The barn was gone, just blackened beams and smoldering ash. Elias paced the edge of the clearing, with his rifle resting across his arms, eyes scanning every tree, every shadow. The riders had pulled back again, waiting. He didn't like it. Men like Carver didn't play patient unless they had a reason. Inside the cabin, Clara sat against the far wall, staring at the revolver in her lap. Her face was pale but calm, too calm for a child. Elias stepped inside and closed the door quietly. "You all right?" She nodded once. "They're not gone, are they?" "No," he said. "Not yet." She glanced up at him. "Will you leave?" His jaw tensed. "No, Clara. I won't leave." The moment stretched between them, quiet, heavy. She looked down again, then came the sound. Hooves, from the south trail, not fast, not charging, just one. Elias moved to the window and squinted. A lone rider approached, slow and deliberate, a white cloth tied to the end of his rifle. "Lawman," he muttered. He stepped out cautiously, rifle low but ready. As the rider got closer, Elias recognized the face. Deputy Silas Greavy. Younger than Elias, but with the kind of eyes that had seen too much. Silas stopped 10 paces out. "Elias," he called. Elias gave a nod. "You picked a hell of a time for a visit." "I heard things," Silas said, dismounting. "Men riding under a black brand. Said you were harboring a child that wasn't yours." Elias didn't blink. "She's not a criminal." "No, but Carver's saying she is." Elias stepped closer. "You believe him?" Silas sighed. "I don't know what to believe. I know he's bought men before, judges, sheriffs. Probably tried to buy me, too." "Did you take it?" "No," Silas said, "but I also didn't turn him in. That's on me." They stood in silence for a long moment. Behind them the wind shifted, carrying smoke and the sound of horses moving just out of sight. Silas turned toward the tree line. "He's got a small army." "I counted close to 50. Silas looked back. "What's your plan?" "Make it cost him," Elias said. "Every step." Silas's mouth twitched. "I'm not supposed to pick sides. But if Carver's behind this, and that girl's running from something he did, then maybe it's time someone made a stand." Elias stepped aside. "You want in? There's room inside." Silas hesitated, then tied his horse and followed Elias to the door. Clara stood when they entered, eyes wide. "It's all right," Elias said. "This here's Silas. He's a friend." Silas removed his hat. "Ma'am?" She said nothing but gave a quick nod. Elias began drawing lines in the dirt with the butt of his knife, paths, traps, angles of fire. Silas knelt beside him. "I can ride for town," Silas offered. "Get a few decent men, not many, but enough to raise a spine." Elias looked at him. "You ride now, you might not make it back." "Maybe," Silas said. "But maybe I'm tired of keeping my head down." He stood and turned to Clara. "You hang on, all right? I'm coming back." She met his eyes. "Promise?" "I do." Then he was gone, riding south with a trail of dust in his wake. Elias watched until he vanished, then closed the door and bolted it again. He turned to Clara. "Now we hold." And outside in the woods, the riders waited. The morning sun crept over the ridge, slow and cautious, casting long shadows across Pine Hollow. Frost glistened on rooftops, and the silence that hovered wasn't the kind that came from peace. It was the kind that came from fear. Inside the Flynn ranch, Ruthie stood at her window, one hand tight around her coffee mug, the other resting on the windowsill. Her jaw was clenched, the muscles twitching with thoughts she hadn't dared to say out loud. She hadn't slept. Word had come from a passing trader that 50 men were camped near Elk's Land, led by Judson Carver himself. The town wouldn't move. Not for Elias, not even for a child, but Ruthie Flynn would. She strapped her father's old Colt to her hip, slung a Henry rifle across her back and walked to the barn. The wind cut sharp through the valley, but she didn't feel it. The only thing she felt was fire, rage, sorrow, defiance. She saddled her horse with quiet precision. Then she rode, not toward the town hall, not toward the saloon, not toward the church. She headed for the edge of town where the working folks lived, where names meant something, where debts were paid in sweat and blood. At the blacksmith's yard, she pulled the reins hard. "Dale!" she shouted. "Get out here!" The door opened slow, and a broad-shouldered man stepped into the light, wiping soot from his hands. "You all right, Ruthie?" "No, I'm not." "You still got that scattergun you never shut up about?" His brow furrowed. "Course I do." Good, saddle up. Elias Whitlow's cabin's about to be burned to the ground by Carver and 50 men. There's a little girl in there with him. Dale hesitated. And the law? Silas rode out. No guarantee he's coming back in time. Others gathered as her voice rose. The widow, May Jenkins. Old Jack, who ran freight through the passes. 3 of the timbermen from the mill. I'm not asking you to throw your lives away, Ruthie said. But I'm going. I owe that man more than silence. If any of you've got a spine left, ride with me. A moment passed. Then Dale went inside and returned with his shotgun. I'm in, he said. May picked up her late husband's pistol and buckled it to her hip. So am I. One by one others followed. By the time Ruthie turned her horse west, there were 6 behind her. Not an army, but not nothing. They rode fast, snow flying under hooves, breath rising like smoke. No one spoke. The urgency rode with them, heavy as the saddlebags slung across their shoulders. As they neared Elias's land, the trees thickened, and they slowed. Ruthie raised a hand, signaling them to halt. Ahead through the trees, the smoke of campfires curled up like snakes. She scanned the ridge. Riders moved between trees, not charging, not attacking, yet, but posted, watching. They were close. Split left, she whispered to Dale. Circle wide. We cut through the creek bed. Come in behind. The others nodded and vanished like ghosts into the woods. Ruthie waited until the timing felt right, then kicked her horse into motion. She rode straight up the path toward the cabin. The moment they saw her, 3 of Carver's men stepped out, rifles raised. Stop right there, one barked. She didn't stop. Don't shoot, another shouted. It's a woman. Ruthie reined in 10 yards from them. You tell Judson Carver Ruth Flynn's here to speak. And he'd best come fast, 'cause I'm not one to wait. Confusion flickered across the riders' faces, but Ruthie's voice was steel. Now! The trees pressed close, thick with tension. Elias watched from the cabin window, heart steady, eyes sharper than they'd been in years. Ruthie's ride had drawn eyes, pulled riders from their posts. But it was a gamble, bold, loud, and full of risk. Clara sat by the hearth, revolver still in hand, her small body trembling but her jaw set. She hadn't spoken since Ruthie appeared, but her eyes had never left the window. Elias returned to the table, checking the last tripwire. 2 more traps were set behind the root cellar. The narrow path leading to the back door was rigged with a swing snare, and the rockfall above the east slope was primed. Years of mountain solitude had taught him how to survive wolves and worse. Still, something gnawed at his gut. Outside, hoofbeats scattered, voices rose, movement along the ridge. Then came a knock, light, measured. Elias froze. Knocks didn't come from enemies. He eased to the door, rifle aimed low. It's me, a voice called. Carver sent me to talk. I know you, Whitlow. I fought with you. That voice. Elias cracked the door just a hair. Chester Mott, he said. Didn't know you were still alive. Neither did I, Mott replied. Did some things I'm not proud of. But I owe you. You saved me once back in Shiloh. I'm returning the favor. Elias didn't lower the rifle. Talk. Mott leaned closer, voice low. Carver's not waiting anymore. He's planning to burn you out tonight. Says the girl's the key to a land grab. Her mama married into the Larkspur claim. Lot of money tied to it. Elias narrowed his eyes. Why tell me? Because I'm tired of watching him kill kids. A pause. But there's something else, Mott added. You got a man inside. One of the townsfolk that came with Ruthie. Took money to open the back for Carver's crew. Said he'd do it before sundown. Elias's jaw clenched. Who? Big fella. Grey coat. Limp. Dale. Elias cursed under his breath. Appreciate the warning. Mott tipped his hat. Watch your back. Then vanished into the trees. Elias bolted the door and turned to Clara. Stay here, don't move unless you have to. She nodded, her eyes wide. He slipped out the back and circled wide. The snow had mostly melted near the ridge, leaving wet earth and pine needles slick underfoot. From his cover near the root cellar, he saw Dale crouched behind the smokehouse, fumbling with the trap latch. Elias raised his rifle, then lowered it. He stepped out slow. "Drop it, Dale." Dale spun, hand halfway to his pistol. "Easy," Elias warned. Dale let the gun fall. "I didn't mean to sell out a little girl. I needed the money," Dale hissed. "He said it was just about land, said she wasn't even his. She's not, and that's why she matters." Dale's breath came short, panicked. "I didn't think he'd—" "You didn't think at all," Elias said. Then behind Dale, the crack of a twig. Another rider. Elias fired before the man cleared his holster. The body slumped. Dale dove for his weapon, but Elias was faster. A single shot hit the dirt beside him. "Don't," Elias warned. Dale froze. "Go back. Tell Ruthie what you did, or you won't leave this hill." Shaking, Dale turned and stumbled off, disappearing into the brush. Elias turned back toward the cabin. The light was fading. The attack was coming, but now they were ready. The night broke open with gunfire. No warning, no more circling. Carver's riders came hard from the west ridge, torches burning like angry stars, rifles cracking through the dark. The ground shook with the weight of 50 horses pounding across frozen soil. Elias crouched at the cabin's corner, rifle steady against his shoulder. Each shot he fired was deliberate, clean. One rider dropped, then another. The traps he'd laid earlier sprang to life. Iron jaws clamped onto boots. Tripwires triggered swinging logs that knocked men clean off their saddles. The screams of startled horses echoed through the clearing. Inside, Clara ducked low under the table, revolver in hand, knuckles white. Her breath came quick, but her eyes never left the door. The smoke from the lantern mingled with the gunpowder seeping in through the cracks, filling the cabin with a bitter haze. Ruthie and her handful of riders arrived from the east, rifles blazing. Her voice cut through the chaos. "Stand your ground! Don't give 'em the cabin!" Her men opened fire, forcing Carver's gang to scatter and regroup. The clearing turned into a storm of bullets, shouts and fire. From the ridge above, a horn sounded, sharp and commanding. Carver himself rode into view, black coat whipping in the wind, his horse a shadow against the pale moonlight. His voice carried like thunder. "Burn it down, leave nothing." Elias fired again, dropping one of the torchbearers before he reached the cabin wall. But another made it through. Flames licked at the side of the smokehouse, climbing fast. Silas returned then, riding hard with 3 deputies in tow. Their rifles cut through the riders on the flank, giving Elias and Ruthie's crew a chance to breathe. Silas slid from his saddle, reloading as he ducked behind the stone fence. "Thought I told you I'd be back," he shouted. Elias smirked grimly. "I didn't doubt it." A bullet ricocheted off the fence near Silas's head. He cursed and ducked lower. "They've got numbers. We need the ridge." Elias knew what he meant. The high ground. If they could push Carver's men into the valley below, the fight would turn. "Cover me," Elias said. He sprinted from the cabin wall toward the slope, Clara's voice calling after him. "Elias!" He didn't look back. The climb was steep, mud slick with snowmelt. Bullets tore through branches above his head as he pushed upward, boots digging deep. His lungs burned, but his legs didn't slow. Reaching the ridge, he dropped low and rolled behind a fallen pine. From here, he had a clear line of fire down into the valley. He raised his rifle and let out a long, steady breath. One shot, another. Carver's riders fell, the chaos below twisting into panic as the high ground shifted the tide. Ruthie's men pushed forward. Silas shouted orders, driving the defense like a man possessed. But victory never came easy. A flash of movement to Elias's right. One of Carver's men had circled high. Elias turned too late. The shot rang out, slamming into his side, spinning him to the ground. Pain lit his ribs on fire. His rifle clattered against the rocks. He pressed a hand to his shirt, felt the wet warmth spreading fast. Through the haze, he saw Clara at the cabin door, screaming his name, though he couldn't hear it over the roar of battle. Elias gritted his teeth, dragging himself back to his rifle. He propped it against the log, vision swimming. He wasn't done. Not yet. Below, Carver rode into the clearing, his voice a command above the chaos. And Elias knew the fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. The gunfire dwindled, fading into scattered shots and the low groans of wounded men. Smoke from the burning smokehouse drifted thick through the clearing, the air heavy with the stench of ash and sweat. Horses screamed in the distance as they broke free from their riders, vanishing into the timber. Elias pressed his back against the fallen pine, blood soaking through his coat. Every breath was a knife, but he forced himself to stay upright. From his vantage point on the ridge, he saw Carver dismount, striding into the open with the arrogance of a man who believed himself untouchable. "Whitlow," Carver's voice boomed across the valley, "you can't win. Hand over the girl and maybe I'll let you live to crawl away." Ruthie emerged from behind the stone wall, rifle in hand, eyes blazing. "You're a coward, Carver. Hiding behind children, burning homes, buying men to do your killing." Carver laughed, sharp and bitter. "You think you know me, Ruthie. You don't know a damn thing." "That girl's mine by right." Clara stepped out from the cabin then, revolver shaking in her hands, but pointed squarely at Carver. Her small voice carried with surprising force. "You killed my mama." The clearing went silent. Every head turned toward the child. Carver's smile faltered, but only for a moment. "She was weak. She stood in my way. And you're what's left. You carry her blood and her claim. That makes you mine." Elias forced himself to his feet, stumbling down from the ridge with his rifle still in hand. His voice was rough but steady. "No, Carver. Family ain't something you take. It's something you earn." Carver sneered. "Big words from a man who ran from the world. Hiding in these mountains while I built something real." "You built nothing but graves," Elias said. Ruthie stepped closer, her rifle leveled. "Tell the truth, Judd. Right here, in front of all of them. Did you kill Clara's mother?" The riders who remained shifted uneasily. Their eyes, once blind with loyalty, now wavered. Carver spat on the ground. "She left me no choice. She refused what was hers by duty. She made me do it." The murmurs grew. Men exchanged glances, some lowering their rifles. Clara's voice trembled, but it carried the strength of something greater than fear. "You're not my papa. You're nothing." Carver's jaw clenched. His hand twitched toward his pistol, but too many eyes were on him now. His own men were pulling back, shame dawning in their faces. Silas rode up then, bloodied but alive, deputies at his side. His badge caught the firelight. "That's enough, Carver. You're finished." Carver barked a laugh. "You think you've got the strength to take me alive?" Ruthie answered before Silas could. "No, but we've got the truth. And truth's a rope tighter than any noose." The men who had once cheered Carver began stepping away from him, dropping their weapons into the dirt. The circle broke, leaving him alone in the clearing, a black figure against the smoke. Carver's eyes darted between them, wild now. For the first time doubt cracked his mask. Elias limped forward, rifle raised. "This ends now." But Clara moved faster. She lowered her revolver, not firing, not trembling, just staring at him with a steadiness that made even Judson Carver falter. "I don't belong to you," she said. "I belong to them." The silence that followed was louder than any gunshot. Silas stepped forward, irons in hand. "Judson Carver, you're under arrest." And this time, no one stood to protect him. The valley lay quiet at last. Where fire and thunder had rained hours before, now only smoke curled from dying embers. The snowmelt carried the ash away in thin grey rivulets, as if the land itself wanted to cleanse the memory of the night. Elias sat on the cabin's porch, bandage wrapped tight around his ribs. Each breath still ached, but the bleeding had slowed. His rifle rested across his knees, though the fight was over. Or at least the worst of it. Clara sat beside him, quilt around her shoulders, small hand tucked into his. She hadn't let go since the deputies hauled Carver away in chains. Her silence had shifted, no longer the silence of fear, but of settling into something new. Ruthie emerged from the tree line, coat dusted with ash, face drawn with exhaustion. She leaned against the post near Elias, studying him. "You're lucky to still be breathing." Elias gave a half smile. "Never felt lucky a day in my life." She shook her head. "You had half the valley against you, and you still stood. That ain't luck, Elias. That's stubbornness." Clara's voice came quiet but certain. "It's family." Both adults turned to her. She met Elias's eyes, and for the first time she smiled. Small, tired, but real. Elias squeezed her hand gently. "Family," he repeated, the word rolling heavy and strange on his tongue. It had been years since he let himself believe in such a thing. Ruthie leaned down, brushing a strand of hair from Clara's face. "You've got more grit than most grown men I know," she said. "Your mama would be proud." Clara's eyes watered, but she nodded. "I think she would too." The three sat in silence for a while, watching the horizon lighten as the sun stretched over the hills. The world smelled of pine, smoke, and the faint sweetness of thawing earth. Silas rode up, hat low, his horse weary. He dismounted slowly, the badge on his chest catching the morning light. "Carver's locked up. He won't see daylight till he's standing on the gallows." Elias nodded. "Good." Silas looked at Clara, then back at Elias. "What'll you do now?" Elias gazed out across the valley. The mountains rose proud and steady, the same as they had before the chaos. He thought of years spent hiding in their shadows, running from ghosts of war and betrayal. And now a girl had stumbled into his life and dragged him back into the world. "What I should have done a long time ago," he said finally. "Live, not just survive." Clara leaned against him. "With me?" "With you," he answered without hesitation. Ruthie smiled faintly, the kind that carried both relief and something deeper. "Well then," she said, "seems we've got work to do. A cabin to rebuild, fields to clear, and a little girl to raise." Elias looked at her, the weight of unspoken history between them. Maybe this was the second chance neither had expected. Clara whispered, "Home." Elias pulled her close. "Yeah, Clara, home." The wind carried the sound of birdsong, faint but insistent, breaking through the silence that had hung too long over these hills. Life was stirring again, stubborn as spring, and though the scars of the night would remain, so would the bond forged in fire and fear. Family wasn't just blood, it was who stood with you when the riders came. If this story moved you, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next journey into the untamed West. And don't stop here. Click the video waiting on your screen to keep riding with us through another tale of grit, survival, and the unyielding spirit of the frontier.